Last July, I wrote my first novel in 30 days. And here's the strange part. The writing wasn't the hardest thing. I discovered what really prevented me from writing, fixed it, and wrote more than I ever did in my entire life. In this video, I'll share 3 things that I learned writing this novel. None of them about writing. This isn't a how-to video. It's a what actually happens when you do something big video. If you don't know me, my name is Thor, and I have an MFA in screenwriting from UCLA. But more importantly, I've spent years thinking about writing a novel without actually doing it. False starts, abandoned drafts, and nothing changed until now. In this video, I'll walk you through the story that I told myself that kept me from starting, why giving myself a time deadline changed everything, and the identity shift that happened for me along the way. And one of these hit me so clearly, I remember thinking, oh, this is why people say that starting something changes you. And if you're curious how I'm making sure this doesn't become another unfinished project, you can actually play a small part in that. And I'll tell you about it at the end. But to understand why that matters, I have to start with what kept me stuck for years. For the longest time, I thought the hardest part of writing a novel was staring at the blank page, knowing I had to fill it with 100,000 words or more. And not just words, but good ones. I'd read authors that I love and think, this is so good, I could never write this. That first paragraph, that opening line that sets the tone for the whole book. I mean, you read something like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and you think, who am I to think I could write something like that? There was the best of writers, and then there was Thor. And what made this worse was I actually thought I should know how to do this. I have an MFA in screenwriting from UCLA. I've written professionally. I've taught writing. Now, screenwriting is different from a novel. In a script, I have to show you what a character is thinking. In a novel, I can just tell you what they're thinking. But in some ways, that actually makes things harder. You have to invent so many things. The world, the character's inner life, the voice, the tone. So when I'd sit down to write a novel and feel stuck, my brain didn't say, this is hard. It said, see, you're not a novelist. Who are you kidding? I told myself novelists were a different category of writer. Stephen King probably knew something I didn't. Matt Haig, who wrote The Midnight Library, love that book. He's brilliant and I'm not. John Scalzi, also brilliant. Thor, not. I don't know, maybe there was some secret handshake I missed. And that story, the story that those writers were different, they were better, kept me frozen for years. So many false starts, few pages here, promising start there, and then I'd stop because stopping felt safer than finding out I couldn't do it. Here's the part that surprised me. On day 1 of this experiment last July, after about an hour of writing, I remember thinking, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought. I mean, it wasn't easy. Words didn't just magically fly into my computer, but it felt doable. And that was uncomfortable because it meant something important. The problem all along wasn't skill or talent or training or discipline. The problem was the story I'd been telling myself for years about who I was allowed to be. I'd convinced myself there were people who wrote novels and then there was me, which is ironic because I wanted to write a story and what held me back was the story I'd written in my own head about myself. It's kind of wild when you think about it. So I knew I wasn't going to fix that story overnight. That would take time. So instead of trying to change who I was, I changed the container. Here's what I mean by changing the container. For years, whenever I'd thought about writing a novel, the story in my head went something like this. A novel is 100,000 words and it takes a year or more, and real novelists stick with it for that long. And honestly, I didn't think I was that person. I didn't think I was a real novelist. Not because I'm lazy, but because a year is a long time to carry that amount of doubt, the doubt of whether I could actually do it. So instead of asking myself to become a different kind of person, I asked a smaller question, a better question. Could I show up for 30 days? I told myself, I'll give this 1 month. I'll see how far I can go. And when I thought about 30 days, that felt possible. Not easy, but possible. And there was proof this wasn't actually insane. People write 50,000 words in a month all the time. There's literally a thing called National Novel Writing Month. So this wasn't some heroic, impossible standard. It was just a container other humans had survived. And that mattered because a couple of years ago, when I tried to write the novel, I quit. Why'd I quit? I had the same desire, same skill, same me. The only difference this time was the container. 30 days gave me boundaries. It told my brain when to start and also when it could stop arguing about whether this was possible or not. And one other thing helped: accountability. I told someone I was doing this, not in a big public way, just enough that quitting would feel awkward. I didn't want to let them down. And honestly, I didn't want to let this version of me down either. Once the container was set, something unexpected happened. Motivation stopped being the main character. To reach my goal of 50,000 words, I just needed about 1,700 words a day. Some days more, some days less. Now, to be honest, I didn't wake up every morning feeling inspired. Some days I wrote tired. Some days I wrote badly. But the question wasn't, do I feel like writing? It was, how many words do I need to write today? And that shift made everything easier because I wasn't trying to write a great novel. I was just trying to stay inside the container. Here's the part no one really tells you when you start something like this. The identity shift where you go from being someone who's just doing the thing, like I'm writing 1,700 words a day, to someone who is the thing. Oh, I'm a novelist. That change doesn't happen at the very end. It happens earlier. The day that you realize, oh, I can actually do this. For me, that realization showed up in a really simple way. At the beginning, you're writing, it's kind of exciting. Those first few days, you're like, oh, wow, 5,000 words, then 10,000. And you start doing the math, that's like 1/5 of the way there. And somewhere in there, something changes. You stop thinking, I'm trying to write a novel, and you start thinking, I am writing a novel. Not because it's finished, not because it's good, but because you're doing the work consistently inside the container. Then you hit the middle. For me, somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000 words. That was the hardest part. The excitement of the beginning, it's gone. And the end still feels so far away. It's just you, the work, and a lot of days that felt pretty unremarkable. Then something strange happens as you get closer to the end. Around 40,000 words, I remember thinking, wait, I could actually finish this. Time starts to feel elastic. What seemed impossible at the beginning suddenly feels possible. Like I could pull an all-nighter and be done with this tomorrow. And when I finally crossed 50,000 words 3 days early, that exact moment, I cried. I actually filmed it. Not because it was perfect, not because the novel was done, and it's not even done yet, by the way, but because I had done the thing I'd been telling myself for years I wasn't. I went from being the guy staring at the blank page to someone who had written 50,000 words in less than 30 days. And that's when it really clicked. I didn't write because I was a novelist. I became a novelist because I wrote. Only after doing it could I imagine a different life for myself. A life where once a year I could go somewhere interesting, Paris maybe, and spend a few months writing a book. I couldn't imagine that life before. Not because it wasn't possible, but because I hadn't given myself any evidence yet that it was possible. Action didn't follow identity. Identity followed action. That's the part I wish more people understood when they're standing at the beginning of something new. So I'm trying to keep acting like the person I just became. I'm still working on this book. It's not finished, it's not polished, but it's in progress. And one of the things that helps me keep showing up is letting the work be seen before it's perfect. So if you're curious to read the in-progress draft, not a finished novel, just the version that exists right now, I'm inviting a few people to read along while I finish it. Just so you know what you'd be reading, it's about a woman who comes back from a week in Hawaii and realizes she doesn't remember what happened. Everyone tells her she's changed, that she's a nicer person, and her life starts falling apart. So she goes back to Hawaii, this time like a detective, trying to figure out what happened to her. The novel is called Come Back New. If that sounds interesting, head over to Instagram and send me a DM that says, I'm reading. I'll send you the current draft, whatever version exists right now. No feedback required, no expectations. Just a few real readers while I finish the book. Sometimes the best way to become who you want to be is to let a few people see you while you're becoming. And if you want more conversations like this about starting things and identity shifts, you're welcome to subscribe.